So Rob, what do you have in the camera here?
All right, so we're getting ready to do a shot here. We're going to do a portrait. I was hoping to get you and Tim and maybe Andrew to stand in here. The camera is very simple. Nothing more than a big empty box. Yeah. This is how I adjust my focus. It's just by making that box larger or smaller. The lens I have on today is a Ross lens from 1862. This was one of the best optics manufacturers in the world at the time. The biggest manufacturers being from London, Paris, and Germany was, I would say, in third place. And finally, well, not last place, but fourth place, we'd say the American optic makers, C.C. Harrison being the most famous one. And he was famous for his globe lenses, which were very expensive and were used by Matthew Brady. So those were probably globe lenses that took the battles out here at Gettysburg. Now I can control a number of things through this lens here. And I'm going to put the dark cloth up so you can see. Gary, if you want to go down and stand in front of the camera here.
All right, good. Can we have the whole group, or just if we didn't catch it?
So as you look through the back of the camera, we see a murky upside down image. I'm going to try to slide under here and bring this somewhat into focus. There we go. And we'll have you guys back up a bit more. Either that or I'm going to have to move the camera. Now, as you can see, it's awful bright and it's hard to control focus and depth of field. So what I use is various size apertures or Waterhouse stops to actually control how much light comes into the lens. I have a number of different size apertures here, and all they do simply is go down in between the elements of the lens here. So as I stop this down, it does two things. Number one, it gives me a sharper image. Number two, it increases my depth of field. In other words, if I was shooting photographs of, let's say, troops in rank, that would be a way to control where not only the front rank but the back rank is in focus. The other thing, though, it does is lengthens my exposure time. Now I'm shooting pretty quick out here. We got a lot of sunlight, but the smaller the aperture, the longer my exposure is. And where that really becomes a problem is indoors when you're shooting portraiture. Hard to get kids and animals to sit still for 15-20 seconds. So I'm going to stop that down just a little bit more. And Gary's going to fill you in on some things while I run back to the dark room here and grab my plate. So if he can carry on without moving around too much, I'll go retrieve my plate and we'll make the exposure. Now that's a plate I've already poured. It's wet. It's sitting in a tank of silver nitrate right now. In a minute we'll let you see in the back of the dark room there. But I have to take that plate out, put it into a light-proof holder, put that on the back of the camera. And while that's happening, the plate is drying, especially in July heat, especially when it was here during the 1860s. You can imagine these photographers running back and forth as fast as they can, trying to get that plate to the camera, exposed and back there and developed before it dries out. The longer I take, the less information is gathered on that plate. So off I go. All right, so as I focus the camera, I now bring over the plate holder with that wet plate inside of here. As I move out the focusing glass and I attach this to the back of the camera, because of the way the camera is built and the integrity of it, my plate is now inside this light-proof box. However, it is all in focus. I cannot see through the camera when I take the picture. So if you see Hollywood portraying a guy back here with a big flash, you know the director knows nothing about vintage photography because the guy's looking at a piece of wood. So we're standing off to the side to make this image. We cover it up the camera to make sure no stray light rays get onto my plate. I remove a dark slide, and now it's nothing more than removing the lens cap and counting. Exposure here, I'm going to give this maybe about 2 seconds is all. So it's going to be relatively quick. Now, if I had time, I'd set them up a little bit different. I'd have more light coming into their face, but for demonstration purposes, this is going to be fine. Here we go, guys. You ready? Absolutely still. Very tall, confident looks. Ready? And counting. That's it. All that happens is the light rays are crossing the center of that lens, and they project an image onto that sensitized plate. Now I need to get that plate back to the darkroom, get developer on it before it dries out. That's the biggest reason why they had these portable darkrooms with them. It wasn't so much to carry their gear, it was a portable laboratory that they needed to be able to process these plates in the field. It wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity in 1860s. So in I go. And within a minute or two here, you're going to see the image come out. Come on back here, and I want to get you a view of what actually takes place in the darkroom wagon. So imagine this being Matthew Brady's wagon here. You have a red window in here that allows red light to come through. What I did was put the plate in a tray and then poured on my iron developer in one smooth motion and simply rock it back and forth. And within a couple seconds, if my exposure is correct, I'll start seeing highlights right away. And I continue that action until I see details in the dark areas. That's when I know it's time to stop things. So all I do is pour on water. So I'm at that point right now. Now we can bring it out into daylight, now that it's been sufficiently rinsed.
Here we go again, everyone.
So now here we are outside, of course, and with our fixing operation. Now I did get pretty decent exposure here in the dark areas, and hopefully my highlights aren't blown out too much. What I shoot is called orthochromatic. So in other words, when you're trying to take a digital photograph and turn it black and white and add a little sepia, and you go, well, yeah, it looks sort of good, but it doesn't look like one of Gibson's photographs. The reason is my plates expose to light differently. They react to it differently. So it's not true black and white. It's more like the film of the 1920s and 30s. There's a motley looking group if I ever saw one.
Some more than others.
But as you can see, how the highlights are just simply, the sky's just blown out in the background. That's what you see on these plates all the time. Collodion can't differentiate between clouds and a blue sky. So all that just sort of turns a grayish white. Now I'll take it out of here and we can have a much closer look. Remember, it needs a dark black background to be seen well. So that's sort of a murky one in the pan there.
Rob, while you're doing this, how long did it take you to be able to, you just shot 2 plates and they both look great. When you first started out, was it like that?
Oh, absolutely not. I went through dozens of glass plates. And I'm not saying this, you know, boastingly or anything, but this is by far the most absolute difficult thing I've ever done in my life. I've been doing wet plate for close to 30 years now, and still it throws you a curve. And just like back then, you see the Mary Tepe picture, you see how great those prints look of that, but you look at the original plate, you go, gosh, that looks pretty beat up looking. And it's not aged. That's probably how it looked when it was taken. You have a lot more latitude when you're making a print instead of making a positive as we're doing today. So you have to have your exposures and your chemistry, I think, even a little better. But here, if we turn this around, here, if you want to hold up that cloth.
Again, we're going to turn that plate into an ambrotype.
There you go. And you can see my highlights are a little blown out, so that's a little bit overexposure there. Gary feels that he never gets enough exposure, but
well, that's
in this
so
case
unfair.
He got a little bit over. But again, you can see the depth of field, how as we get deeper, we start to lose focus. Also around the outside of the photographs, you get the spherical abbreviation. In other words, the lens can't cover the plate as perfectly as a modern lens does. So you get, from the hand ground plates of the era, you get this almost looks like a motion kind of thing with the ground moving. And that's very common of the era. So those are all different elements that are in my photographs that just give it more of that nostalgic look to begin with.